Hello everyone, this is Artistic Antics LLC. My name is Amanda and today we're going to be making Boogeyman Soap inspired by Oogie Boogie from The Nightmare Before Christmas. Happy spooky season! First, let's go over the materials and ingredients we're going to need for this soap. We're going to grab our pitcher, a spoon, our molds. Right here we have 2 different worm molds, but you can choose one or the other, it doesn't matter. Our 10-inch loaf mold, 99% isopropyl alcohol, a cutting board, something to cut your soap with, about 2.5 pounds of goat milk soap base, 1.5 pounds of clear glycerin soap base, a digital scale, 6 different color blocks, or if you want to narrow this down to 3 colors or 4 colors, you can choose not to do as many colors for the worms that we're going to make for Oogie Boogie's mouth. Some white mica, some glow-in-the-dark green mica, and our fragrance oil. We're going to be using dark crystal fragrance oil today, but you can use any soap-safe fragrance oil that you want. Without further ado, let's get started. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to measure out 1 pound or 16 ounces of goat milk soap. We are also going to grab our green chrome color block and cut that into quarters. We're going to be using 1 quarter per 1 pound of soap. Make sure to cut your soap base and color block into small cubes for the microwave. The larger the cubes are, the slower it will melt in the microwave, so the smaller cubes possible will make the melting process faster. Voila! Also, this recipe is going to be available on my website for $5. The link is in the description. If you are a Patreon, you will have access to all the recipes that I make for the cost of your subscription. If you aren't a Patreon, you can sign up to my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. It's a great way to help support my small business. Grab your plastic pitcher, put it on your digital scale, make sure to tare it so that it's at 0, cut your goat milk melt and pour soap into little cubes, and measure out 1 pound of soap base. Add your slivers of green chrome color block. Don't worry if it's a little bit more than 1 pound with the color block added in. And we're going to melt this in the microwave at 30-second intervals, making sure to stir in between intervals so that our soap base melts evenly. That is after 1 minute of melting, so I'm going to go ahead and take my spoon and give it a quick stir before popping it back in the microwave again. After about 2 minutes of melting, it looks like my soap base and color block is fully melted. Go ahead and place that on your digital scale, tare it, and now it's time to add our fragrance oil and green glow-in-the-dark mica. For goat's milk melt and pour soap base, you can use up to 0.4 ounces of fragrance oil per pound. Since we melted down 1 pound of soap, we're going to measure out 0.4 ounces into our plastic pitcher. Before we stir our fragrance oil into our soap base, we're going to add our green glow-in-the-dark mica. This mica has a bit of a chalk-like consistency, so I like to add it with the fragrance oil to try to break it up and make it easier to stir in. You can use between a half teaspoon to 1 teaspoon per pound of melt and pour soap base. We're going to use 1 teaspoon for this recipe so that we get a really bright green glow. Once we have our fragrance oil and mica measured into our soap base, we're going to stir very thoroughly to combine. In between stirring, I would recommend looking at the bottom of your pitcher to see if there are any clumps of green mica that need to be broken up and stirred in. Just poke those with your spoon to break those up and stir, stir, stir. Once your green soap base is fully combined, we're going to move over to our 10-inch loaf mold. We're going to pour in our soap base and spritz the top of the loaf with 99% isopropyl alcohol to pop any bubbles. While we let that set, we're going to make our worms. As you can see from my mouth, we're going to make blue, yellow, and purple worms. If you don't want to have multicolored worms, you can just choose one color here. We're also going to add some green glow-in-the-dark mica to some of our worms. I'm going to be using this smaller silicone dish to melt down my soap base for the worms. These are normally used to make candies or chocolates, but I like to use them for when I'm melting a little bit of soap base down and I don't want to rinse out my pitcher. If you don't want to use these, just rinse out your plastic pitcher with some hot water and wipe out the inside with a paper towel, and you can reuse that for your worms. We're going to be melting down 2 ounces of clear glycerin soap for each color that we're using for a total of 6 ounces. If you're doing this at home, you want between 4 and 6 ounces of worms. So if you're using one color, you can melt down 6 ounces of clear glycerin soap base. We're going to be starting with yellow, and I'm not going to be adding any green glow-in-the-dark mica to these. Hey-ya! Boom. For your color blocks, use about 1/8 of the color block per 2 ounces of soap. So for me, I'm going to be using 1/8 of a block of yellow, 1/8 of a block of blue, and 1/8 of a block of purple. If you are doing one color for your worms, you can use about 1/4 of your chosen block. I'm going to be moving forward in this demonstration for 3 different colored worms, so keep that in mind if you are modifying the recipe. Put your pitcher of choice onto your digital scale, tare it, cut your glycerin soap base into small cubes until you have 2 ounces of clear glycerin soap. Add that to your pitcher along with 1/8 cube of yellow color block, shaved down so that it melts easier. The reason that we are using clear glycerin soap for the worms is that I want our worms to be very vibrant. Since this soap has a clear base, the color blocks are going to be much more saturated than if we were using our goat milk soap base. We're going to throw this in the microwave at 15-second intervals. Since we are not melting down a lot of soap at a time, we are cutting our intervals in half so that our soap doesn't get too hot. Same as before, we're going to stir in between intervals to ensure even melting. Once your soap base is melted, I'm just going to stir in the color block by swirling it in my pitcher here. If you want to add fragrance oil to your worms, you can. It would be 0.025 ounces of fragrance oil per 2 ounces of clear soap base. I am choosing not to add fragrance oil to my worms because 0.025 ounces is way too small for me to measure out. The rest of our soap will have fragrance oil incorporated, so it's okay to skip it for small details like this. When the color is fully combined, go ahead and pour it into your worm molds. I'm going to be making a mix of small worms and big worms to add some interest to the middle of the soap. Once you pour in your worms, make sure to spritz the top of the worms with isopropyl alcohol to pop any bubbles. I'm going to go ahead and make the rest of my worms really quickly by melting down another 2 ounces of clear glycerin soap and 1/8 blue color block, and separately melting down 2 ounces of clear glycerin soap and 1/8 purple color block. Again, I'm trying to make a combination of large and small worms for this soap. For our purple worms, I'm going to add 1/8 of a teaspoon of green glow-in-the-dark mica and stir that in with my spoon. I don't like adding the green glow-in-the-dark mica to all my worms because I worry that the middle of the soap would look very similar to the top and the bottom layers of the soap. So I'm going to add the glow to only one color to make the soap look a little bit more interesting in the dark. When making your worms, you will probably have to unmold some worms before pouring in some other colors. So make sure that your worms are set completely and put the worms that you have made in a safe place. Now that we have made all of our worms, we're going to make the red dice embeds that are going to be on the top of the soap. For our dice, measure out 2 ounces of either goat milk or clear glycerin soap base. I'm going to be using goat milk soap base, which is going to make them kind of salmony, but if you want more of a vibrant red, I would recommend using the clear glycerin soap base. Then we're going to cut up 1/8 of a block of the perfect red color block and add that to your pitcher. Melt that down in 15-second intervals, stirring in between. I'm going to be using both a numbered and dot dice molds just so that I can make more dice at a time. Once your soap is all melted, pour that into your dice molds. It is likely that the red soap base is going to harden again before your dice are ready to be unmolded. Don't worry. You can remelt it in the microwave in 10-second intervals. You're going to want 10 dice, so pour and remelt your soap as many times as you need to get the 10 dice. Check the top of the green soap layer. You can check your layers to see if they're ready by lightly poking it with your finger. If your finger breaks through the soap, it needs to set more, but if it feels pretty firm, you're ready for your next layer. Seems like it's almost set. For our next layer, we're going to try to make it look like Oogie Boogie's mouth with multicolored worms in it, just like my costume. So we're going to melt down 12 ounces of clear glycerin melt and pour soap base and 1/8 of black color block. Hey-ya! Full disclosure, I had to film this middle part twice because my camera cut off while I was filming the first time. So now I'm having to film both this and the B-roll footage at the same time, which is a little tricky. I'm pretty sure it's all Jack Skellington's fault. It's all your fault, you. Now that that's out of the way, put your plastic pitcher on your digital scale, tare it so that it's at 0, and measure out your 12 ounces of chopped clear glycerin soap base. Add in your 1/8 cube of black color block. Melt it in the microwave at 30-second intervals until it's all melted, stirring in between with your spoon. Once your black soap is all melted, we're going to measure out our fragrance oil. For a clear melt and pour soap base, the fragrance oil recommended is 0.2 ounces per 1 pound of soap base, half of what is recommended for goat milk soap base. So for 12 ounces of soap base, we're going to add 0.15 ounces of fragrance oil. Once you've added your fragrance oil, mix until it's fully combined. Grab your isopropyl alcohol, black soap base, and worms, and we're going to move over to our 10-inch soap mold loaf. We're going to spray the top of the green layer with isopropyl alcohol right before pouring half of our black soap base. The isopropyl alcohol helps the layers to stick together. After pouring half of your soap base, you're going to add your worms that you made earlier. Try to add your worms in a horizontal way for fun wavy shapes when you cut into your soap loaf. If you add your worms vertically, you will just get little half circle shapes instead. If you want some variety in the shapes, add your worms in horizontally and diagonally. It was incredibly hard to add the worms in while in costume and filming the B-roll, so it's not as precise as I would have wanted. Darn you, Jack Skellington! Once all your worms are in the black layer, spray the top of the worms with isopropyl alcohol and pour the rest of your black soap into the mold on top of the worms. Don't worry if some of the worms are poking out of the black, it'll just look like some worms are escaping from Oogie Boogie's mouth. Once you're done pouring the black layer, make sure to spritz the top with isopropyl alcohol. While the worm layer is setting, we're going to finish making our dice. Once you have all 10 of your dice, we're going to color in the numbers and dots with our white mica. You're going to need your white mica, isopropyl alcohol, a clean makeup or paintbrush that you don't care about, and a small container to hold your mica. We're going to pour a little bit of our white mica into our plastic container. I'm using this plastic clamshell mold. You don't need a lot of mica at all, about like 1/8 of a teaspoon, if that. Lots of 1/8 of things today. Take a shot of water every time I say 1/8. Then you're going to add a little bit of isopropyl alcohol to your plastic container with the mica. Then I'm just going to stir that gently in with my makeup brush to get it stirred into the mica. Isn't that pretty? Now lay all of your dice on a paper towel. Take your makeup brush, dip that into the mica solution, and dab it onto the dice faces to fill in the numbers. I highly recommend doing this technique one face at a time. I just find it to be a lot more clean and it keeps your gloves a lot cleaner. Once one face is filled in with the mica solution, we're going to rub that face onto the paper towel to clean it off. As you can see, that gets rid of all the extra mica around the numbers, but it leaves the mica that is in the number divot. Repeat this process until all of the numbers or all of the dots are filled. When you're rubbing your dice onto the paper towel, make sure you hold the edges of the dice so that the tips of your gloves or the tips of your fingers don't get any mica on them. That helps keep the dice faces a lot cleaner. I borrowed this technique from some dice makers that I saw on TikTok. This process is a little tedious, but I really think that the attention to detail helps the soap all come together. Once your worm layer is almost set, it's time to make the final green layer. We're going to repeat our process that we used to make the first green layer. Measure out 1 pound of goat milk soap base, cut up 1/4 of green chrome color block, melt it in the microwave at 30-second intervals until completely melted. Add 0.4 ounces of dark crystal fragrance oil. Measure and add 1 teaspoon of green glow-in-the-dark mica and mix thoroughly. Don't forget to check the bottom of your pitcher for any mica clumps because they need to be broken up and mixed in. Before we pour in this layer, I want to make a quick note. We're not going to be pouring all of the green layer into the mold. We're going to save a couple of tablespoons of green soap base for when we put the red dice on top of the soap. Spritz the worm layer with 99% isopropyl alcohol, then immediately afterwards pour 90% of the green soap base onto the worms. We're going to let this set for 20 to 30 minutes. While we're waiting for this layer to set, you can finish up your dice if you haven't already, or if your dice are finished, you can measure and line up the dice that you have on the side of the soap mold. You're going to want 1 dice per inch of soap, and I would recommend having the dice try to be in the center of each inch. This way, when we cut the soap, each soap bar is going to have a dice on top of it. Spray the top of the soap with isopropyl alcohol to pop any bubbles. Okay, it's been about 30 minutes and our green layer is set enough that we can put our dice on. I've already spaced out my dice, as you can see here, so I'm just going to line them up on top of the soap loaf exactly how I spaced them out. I'm leaving about 1/2 centimeter to 1 centimeter of space between the dice and the edge of the mold. Once all the dice are ready, we're going to melt down the leftover green soap base that we saved. We're going to do this by melting it in the microwave at 10-second intervals to avoid overheating it, stirring in between intervals. Once it's fully melted, spritz down the top of your soap loaf with isopropyl alcohol and pour the rest of the green soap into the mold. Make sure that you get the soap in between the dice and behind the dice and the mold so that the dice are fully set in the soap layer. Then spray the top of the soap with isopropyl alcohol to pop any bubbles. That's it. Now we're going to wait about 4 hours or up to overnight before we cut into this soap. Welcome back to Soap Cutting by Boogeyman Soap. It's been about 12 hours, so it's time to cut and unmold this soap. This is not going to be easy. To unmold the soap, we're going to break the vacuum seal, making sure to be careful of the dice embeds that are poking out on the top of the loaf. We're just going to pull away the sides of the mold from the soap just like that. Flip it and gently pull the mold away from the soap. Once that vacuum seal breaks, you can just grab the soap loaf and pull it out completely. If you saw the Rainbow Energy soap tutorial, you know that we're going to want to cut this vertically. If you cut it horizontally, you're going to put pressure on your layers, which could make them break apart. You can either use a cutting board or a soap cutting guide. Let's start with the soap cutting guide and then move over to our cutting board. Being very careful of the knife so that I don't pop myself. By the way, if you do make this soap, don't wear an inflatable costume while cutting it. I am a professional and I know exactly what I'm doing at all times, but it is never a good idea to wield a knife when your field of vision is obstructed. I'm going to try to cut it in between the dice to make sure that each soap bar has a full dice embed in it. Oh my gosh, I cannot see the soap at all. Normally when I cut my soap, I have to use two hands, one on the handle and one on the tip of the knife in order to push it down through the soap. But with the costume on, I had to use one hand to try to keep the eye holes where my eyes are so that I can actually see what I'm doing. So I ended up having to like hold the knife with both of my hands and then just go on faith to see how the soap cutting went. Bad. The soap cutting went bad. This bar is super skinny and not straight at all, but you know what? It is a soap bar and it will work like soap. Now to do this 8 more times. 9 more times? I don't know. I'm going to try to turn the fan off the costume so that my eye holds are actually at my eyes. This is actually the worst soap cutting I've ever done in my whole life. This was such a bad idea. Look at that soap wiggle. Oh my goodness. Hey, that's actually not too bad. The only crooked side is the side that was crooked from the first cut, but otherwise that's looking pretty good. All right, I think this whole no fan thing is gonna work out, but I look so silly right now. I'm gonna do the rest on the cutting board because it is actually impossible to use the soap cutting guide when I cannot see. Because the guide is not as tall as my soap loaf is. So I'm gonna see if this provides better results. All right. Okay, let's see the damage. Oh, it actually looks good. Hooray! I think the cutting board is working out just fine. Look at us, we're twins. We look the same. As long as I keep this costume on my head. Oh my goodness. Now the problem is the costume is too deflated and so the eye holes are too low. And I think my breath is starting to fog up the eye holes. And that is crooked. Jeez Louise. This is extremely hard to do in this costume. Once the knife goes down, it's all on faith because I cannot see it at all. God, it's warm in here without the fan on. I am nothing if not committed to the bit. The good thing about having the fan off is I can now see through the eye holes. The bad thing is now the eye holes are fogging up because there's no fan. I look like I'm some melting Oogie Boogie ice cream. Oh, not too bad for not being able to see anything. I did my best, and that's the only thing that matters. The best part of the soap is that it glows in the dark, but to activate the glow-in-the-dark properties, you do need to charge it. You can do this by using a black light, sunlight, fluorescent light, or just regular light bulbs. I'm going to use a black light because it's the fastest. It takes about 3 to 4 minutes of black light exposure to activate the green glow-in-the-dark mica. For direct sunlight, it takes about 7 to 8 minutes, and it would take about a half an hour for fluorescent or regular light bulbs to charge the soap fully. Bam! Look at that glow. Isn't that beautiful? You will notice that the side of the soap that was exposed to the black light is glowing, and since the other side of the soap was not exposed to black light, it does not glow. But doesn't it look super cool in the dark? You can even see some of the purple worms glowing in his mouth. Thank you for watching the making of my Boogeyman soap. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys make this soap yourself, be sure to tag me. My handle is Artistic Antics LLC on Instagram and TikTok. I would love to see any videos or pictures that you take. You can find the recipe for this soap in the link in the description, or by signing up to my Patreon, you will get access to all of my recipes for the cost of your subscription. The background that I used today was from Cozy Rain. I hope you have a spooky Halloween season, and I will see you guys later. Bye! Ugh. I am so excited to get out. Oh my goodness, I've been wearing this costume for like 8 hours now. I just can't wait to be out of it. I'll take that.